My name is Amelia, and let me take you straight into the night. Everything I thought I knew collapsed in front of me. It was my 31st birthday. The candles were glowing, the whole restaurant buzzing with familiar faces, and my husband held up his phone like he was about to capture a perfect family moment. His mother, Margaret, smiled wider than I had ever seen her smile. She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a pale pink envelope decorated with silver butterflies. Everyone leaned forward thinking it was a heartfelt card, or maybe tickets to something fancy. Instead, I felt the weight of legal paper inside before I even tore it open. My hands shook as I slid the documents free and saw bold letters across the top, petition for dissolution of marriage. Yes, divorce papers on my birthday. The restaurant's hum faded into a blur. My husband steadied his phone, making sure my reaction was recorded. His sister Emma had hers ready too. They wanted a performance, my breakdown tears streaming while strangers looked on. They wanted evidence of my humiliation to replay later, but the strangest calm settled over me. A kind of crystal clarity that burned away the fog of confusion I had lived in for 2 years. They believed they were handing me destruction, but they had no idea what I already held close to my heart, something I had discovered only 3 days earlier. I looked at the signature line, picked up the pen they had thoughtfully provided, and signed my name with handwriting steadier than it had been in months. When I set the pen down, my mother-in-law's triumphant smile faltered for the first time. "Thank you," I said, folding the papers and sliding them back into the envelope. "This is the most generous gift you could have given me." Murmurs rippled across the room. Mr. Romano, the owner of the restaurant where I had worked countless shifts, raised his eyebrows from behind the counter. Regular customers who had known me for years paused mid-conversation. They sensed something bigger was unfolding than just a family drama. And in that moment, standing at the edge of the booth, with divorce papers in one hand, I realized I wasn't breaking. I was free. Free from the endless criticism. Free from the silent looks that passed between mother and son. Free from trying to prove myself in a game rigged against me. That night should have been the cruelest twist of fate, but instead it became my first breath of independence. My story of betrayal was about to turn into something none of them saw coming. Because while Margaret spent weeks planning my humiliation, I had quietly prepared for my own transformation. And the real surprise, the one they would never forget, was still waiting in my purse. This was only the beginning of my revenge, and it was far sweeter than any of them could have imagined. The night of my birthday should have been the end, but the truth is, the ambush had been brewing long before the cake, the candles, and the envelope with silver butterflies. 3 days earlier, I had walked into the kitchen before my shift at Romano's. The house was supposed to be quiet. Instead, I found Margaret hunched over the table glasses, perched low on her nose, scribbling in red ink across official documents. She startled when she heard my footsteps on the hardwood. With surprising speed for a woman in her 60s, she gathered the stack, folded it with care, and slid it into that same pink envelope. "Good morning, dear," she said, her voice coated with syrup. That one word, dear, cut through me, sharper than any insult. Margaret had never once used it before. To her, I was always that girl, or David's wife, spoken with the kind of disdain that lingered long after. Hearing her call me dear was like hearing a snake sing. I noticed the envelope immediately. The pale pink paper, the embossed silver script that read, "Happy Birthday," the delicate butterflies dancing around the edges. It looked festive, expensive, and thoughtful. But as her fingers traced its outline, her eyes shone with something else, satisfaction. "Family paperwork," she explained, slipping the envelope into her purse as if that was the end of it. "Something David will need to sign." I wanted to ask. My chest tightened with suspicion, but her laugh cut me off. "Oh, this is special," she said lightly, her tone almost playful. "Something I've been working on for quite some time. Even David doesn't know yet." Her words clung to me the rest of that day. For 2 years, she had never planned surprises, never offered kindness without a barb hidden beneath. Suddenly, she was sweet, attentive, even suggesting we celebrate at Romano's, my restaurant, the place she had always considered beneath her standards. Something was wrong. Still, part of me wanted to believe. I wanted to believe she had finally seen how hard I worked, how much I loved her son, how I had tried to mold myself into their family's world of polished expectations. Maybe she was ready to accept me. Maybe this birthday would be a turning point. But deep down I knew. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach as I poured coffee that morning. I knew her sudden warmth wasn't acceptance, it was calculation. She called again that week, checking my schedule, making sure I was free. She wanted everything arranged perfectly. And when she said wear something nice but not too formal, you'll want to be comfortable, I caught the edge in her voice. It wasn't excitement, it was anticipation. I brushed it aside. Because sometimes it's easier to lie to yourself than to face what your instincts already know. And that's why when the envelope appeared on my birthday night, I wasn't shocked. I was ready. But here's the thing, this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what you do when betrayal comes. It's about the choices you make in the silence of your own heart when no one is cheering for you and no one is on your side. That's what saved me. And if you're watching right now, maybe you've been there. Maybe you felt the sting of being underestimated, of being written off by people who thought they knew your worth. If you have, then you already understand why I didn't crumble when that envelope landed in my lap. Because I had already decided no one gets to define my value. Not Margaret, not David, not anyone but me. If you believe that no one has the right to dictate your worth, then you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, join this community, and let's build a space where betrayal becomes fuel and respect is earned, not granted. That morning in the kitchen, watching Margaret's careful hands seal my fate into an envelope, I thought she had won. But really, she had given me the chance to prepare, and that preparation would change everything. The birthday ambush was coming, but so was my revenge. I should have trusted my instincts that week. Margaret's sudden sweetness wasn't kindness, it was theater. Every call, every smile, every mysterious glance she shared with David carried an edge I couldn't quite name at the time. Normally she avoided Romano's at all costs. She'd once sniffed at the idea of dining there, calling it too common for her refined tastes. Yet suddenly she insisted my birthday be celebrated right there in my restaurant. She said it was to acknowledge all aspects of your life. It sounded like praise. It felt like a setup. And it wasn't just her. David started grinning at his phone, texting late into the night, hiding the screen when I leaned closer. Emma, who had skipped almost every family gathering that included me, suddenly became eager to help with birthday arrangements. She would smirk whenever Margaret mentioned the dinner, as if she knew a punchline I wasn't in on. I wanted to believe the best. I wanted to think they were planning a surprise party, maybe a gesture to finally include me. But my gut whispered something darker. The way Margaret's tone lingered on special. The way David's affection grew more intense in those last days before my birthday, as if he were compensating for something. One night he held me close, whispering, "Tomorrow will be a day you'll never forget." His words made me feel cherished. Now I realized they were a farewell disguised as devotion. Still I tried to see hope. I stood in front of the mirror, the morning of my birthday, smoothing wrinkles from my navy dress, checking every detail twice. I wanted to look perfect, not just for them, but for myself. Maybe this would be the day I was finally accepted. But let me ask you this. Have you ever ignored the warning signs because you desperately wanted the story to end differently? Have you ever convinced yourself that toxic people were changing, even when their behavior was just a new mask? I did, and it almost broke me. But here's the truth: people show you who they are long before you're ready to accept it. Margaret had shown me for 2 years. Her gifts, her words, her family standards. They were never about love. They were weapons. She didn't want me in her son's life, and nothing I did, no amount of hard work or loyalty, was going to change that. Looking back, the butterflies on that pink envelope feel cruelly symbolic. Pretty on the outside, poison within. So I prepared myself for the dinner. I smiled at David's excitement. I nodded at Emma's mysterious laughter. And I convinced myself maybe, just maybe, they were trying. But deep down I knew the truth. This wasn't celebration. It was execution. And if you've ever been in a moment like that, where every smile feels like a blade, you know the chill that runs down your spine. You know the silence before the storm. That week taught me a lesson I want you to hear. Trust your instincts. They are rarely wrong. Tell me, have you ever felt someone's kindness was just a mask? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know how many of you have lived through that same tension. because that was my reality heading into Romano's that night. A staged celebration, a family plotting humiliation, a husband too cowardly to stop it. And yet, what none of them knew was that I had my own secret. The envelope in Margaret's purse wasn't the only one at that table. Mine was waiting too. And when the time came, I would show them exactly how wrong they had been. The truth is, my birthday ambush wasn't born in a single week. It had roots stretching back to the very first time I joined their family gatherings. If I close my eyes, I can still remember the graduation party for David's cousin, just weeks after our honeymoon. I spent 2 hours getting ready, a conservative black dress, pearl earrings, and my hair pulled back neatly. I wanted to blend in to show respect. I thought that if I looked the part, they might finally accept me. But the moment I walked in, Margaret steered me toward a circle of women I'd never met. Her voice rang out with polished pride. "This is David's wife," she said, pausing dramatically. "She works in the service industry." The pause before those last words told everyone exactly what she meant. Aunt Patricia raised her brows. Cousin Janet let out a sound that was half pity, half amusement. "How interesting," Janet said, her smile sharp as glass. "What kind of service work do you do?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Margaret cut in before I could speak. "She's still figuring things out," she said smoothly, as if I were a child lost in the world. "This restaurant job is just temporary." The conversation rolled on without me highlighting Michael's internship at a law firm, another cousin's marketing promotion, Emma's engagement to a doctor. My name disappeared into the wallpaper. That pattern never stopped. Thanksgiving came 3 months later. The family gathered around a table heavy with food, everyone sharing what they were thankful for. Margaret beamed at Emma's engagement, then praised David's growing accounting practice. When my turn came, I whispered, "I'm grateful for family and health." My words fell flat, quickly swallowed by the clinking of silverware. After dinner, Aunt Patricia pulled me aside. Her tone was syrupy, but her words were knives. "You know Margaret just wants what's best for David. Have you thought about going back to school? There are so many opportunities for women who are willing to improve themselves." It was never just her. At Christmas, Emma unwrapped a silk scarf. David got cufflinks engraved with his initials. My gift, a used copy of Professional Success for Women wrapped in newspaper. Do you understand what that feels like? To sit there smiling weakly while everyone else receives gifts of love and recognition, and yours is a homework assignment for how to become someone you're not. The message was clear: I was not enough. Not for their family, not for their standards, not for their world. And yet I kept trying. I kept showing up with carefully chosen outfits, with polite smiles, with endless patience. I thought if I worked harder, if I proved myself long enough, I would finally belong. But belonging was never their plan for me. My role was to be the outsider, the shadow they could measure themselves against. Every dinner, every party, every whispered comment about finding something more suitable soon was designed to chip away at me. Looking back now, I can see how systematic it was. They didn't want me as part of their family. They wanted me as a constant reminder of what David could have had if he had chosen differently. And I wonder how many of you watching have felt the same way. Sitting at a table where you're supposed to be family, yet treated like a stranger. That was my reality for 2 years. A steady drip of dismissal disguised as advice, criticism disguised as concern, and gifts disguised as kindness, but meant to humiliate. Margaret didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to openly insult me. She controlled the narrative with subtle, poisonous precision. And David, he let her. Those years of silent cruelty prepared the ground for the envelope she would one day hand me in a restaurant full of witnesses. But what she never counted on was that the girl she thought she was breaking was slowly learning how to fight back. And that fight began the moment I realized I didn't need her approval to define my worth. At first, David was my anchor. He used to tell his friends how proud he was of my work ethic. He would brag about how I could manage 6 tables at once, remembering every order without writing anything down. He called me the hardest working woman he knew. But slowly, almost without me noticing, his pride began to shrink into silence. It started small. At family gatherings, when someone asked about my job, David would change the subject. At first, I thought he was protecting me from Margaret's sharp tongue. But soon I realized he wasn't protecting me. He was protecting himself from embarrassment. I remember one evening in particular. It was his birthday, and Margaret had organized a dinner at an upscale restaurant. The table was filled with his colleagues, all polished in tailored suits and talking about investments. One of them asked me, "And what do you do?" I opened my mouth ready to answer, but David jumped in before I could say a word. "She's exploring different opportunities," he said, eyes fixed on his wine glass. "Just figuring out what's next." My cheeks burned. I wanted to scream I have a job. I work harder than half the people here. But the words caught in my throat. His avoidance was louder than any insult Margaret had ever delivered. Soon it became routine. If I mentioned Romanos, he would laugh it off, call it temporary. If I came home exhausted, he would say, "Maybe you're overdoing it. Maybe it's not worth the stress." Every statement chipped away at the foundation of who we once were. And the truth is, silence can be more destructive than cruelty. Margaret had her sharp words, her calculated dismissals. David had nothing but quiet shame. Together they made me invisible. That's the hardest part, isn't it? When the person who promised to stand by you chooses to stand behind someone else. But I want to pause here because I know some of you watching have lived through this. You've seen someone you love shift under pressure, bow to the expectations of others. If you've ever felt your partner slowly slip away into silence, hit subscribe and join this community. You're not alone, and here your voice matters. Back then I thought maybe if I tried harder, he would come back to me. I enrolled in community college. I studied late into the night, my eyes burning from textbooks. I wanted him to be proud again. I wanted Margaret to see I was worthy. But instead of pride, I found disappointment. David looked at my schedule and sighed. "Are you sure this is worth the time and money?" he asked. "Maybe you should just focus on work for now." His words sounded practical, but they were heavy with the same doubt his mother carried in every breath. The man who once kissed me goodbye with admiration now kissed me with pity. And that's when I began to understand his loyalty wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to Margaret, to Emma, to their world of polished perfection. What I didn't know yet was that their loyalty to each other would soon cost them everything. Because while David was busy lowering his eyes whenever my name came up, I was preparing to lift mine higher than they had ever imagined. They thought I was shrinking. In reality, I was learning how to grow in silence. And soon that silence would roar. I wanted so badly to prove them wrong, to prove David wrong, to prove Margaret wrong, to prove to myself that I was more than the girl they whispered about behind closed doors. So I threw myself into the fight. I applied for everything: administrative assistant, receptionist, customer service, office clerk. My resume was stretched thin, every restaurant duty rewritten to sound like corporate skills. Managed multiple client relationships under high-pressure environments. Coordinated complex service delivery with efficiency. It felt like a lie, but it was the only way I could make them take me seriously. Every morning, I refreshed my inbox like a ritual. And every night, I deleted rejection after rejection. Thank you for your interest. We've chosen another candidate. We require applicants with college-level education. We are seeking candidates with more experience. The words blurred together, each one cutting deeper than the last. One time I even sat across from a hiring manager at Henderson Insurance. She looked at my resume for less than a minute, then sighed. "Your background is limited for this position," she said. Her tone wasn't cruel, but it might as well have been. "We typically hire candidates with business degrees. What made you think you'd qualify for account management?" I answered with shaky optimism, trying to spin my customer service as transferable skills. She checked her watch while I spoke. 15 minutes later, I was back in my car staring at the steering wheel, tears blurring the world. And it didn't stop there. I enrolled in community college, scraping together tuition money that should have gone toward rent and groceries. My first night in class, surrounded by professionals upgrading their careers, I felt like a fraud. They spoke confidently about networking, mentors, and internships. I sat in the corner with my notebook, praying no one asked me about my background. Still, I pushed. I pulled all-nighters to finish assignments, aced tests, and forced myself to believe education was the bridge I needed. But the job market didn't care. The rejections kept piling up, each one a reminder that no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't enough. Not for them, not for the world they demanded I belong to. And through it all, Margaret's voice echoed in my mind. Some people just aren't meant for professional environments. She didn't have to say it anymore. I had absorbed it like poison in my veins. The stress began to show. My work at Romano's slipped. I forgot, orders moved slower, lost the spark my regulars loved. Mr. Romano pulled me aside one afternoon. "You seem troubled," he said kindly. "Is everything all right at home?" I smiled weakly, lied, and went back to work. At night, when I thought David might comfort me, I found no refuge. He rubbed my shoulders while I cried over rejection emails, then whispered, "Maybe you're aiming too high." His words weren't cruel, but they carried the same message: lower your expectations, lower yourself. I started to believe it. My mirror showed a tired, hollow-eyed version of me. Clothes grew tighter from stress weight, then looser as my appetite disappeared. I shopped for outfits I couldn't afford, trying to look like the polished women Margaret praised. My credit card debt grew, while my confidence shrank. It felt like I was running on a treadmill that went nowhere, watched by people who shook their heads and said, "Told you so." Looking back now, I see those months as the breaking point. They thought they were proving me wrong. They thought I was collapsing. But in reality, I was reaching the edge of myself, an edge that would force me to leap, not fall. And that leap would come from the most unexpected phone call of my life. Because sometimes rock bottom isn't the end. It's the ground you push off from. The moment that truly shattered any illusions I had came one evening when I overheard a phone call I was never meant to hear. I was folding laundry in the hallway. David's shirts lay across my lap, the steady hum of the dryer filling the silence. That's when I caught Margaret's voice drifting from the living room. She was speaking on the phone with her friend Helen, her words slow and deliberate, each one hitting me like a hammer. "I keep praying he'll come to his senses before it's too late," she said. "David deserves someone who can lift him up, not weigh him down." My hands froze mid-fold, my throat closed. She wasn't just criticizing me, she wasn't just undermining me. She was praying for my marriage to end, whispering to her friends the words I had feared, but never truly believed. I stood there in my own hallway, in my own home, and realized the truth. There was nothing I could do to earn her acceptance. It didn't matter how hard I worked, how many rejections I endured, or how many textbooks I opened late at night. Margaret had already decided I didn't belong. And worse, David wasn't stopping her. He was letting her shape the story of who I was, until even he seemed to forget the woman he had fallen in love with. I closed the laundry basket and carried it upstairs, each step heavier than the last. For hours I sat in silence, staring at the wall, replaying her words. He deserves someone better. He deserves someone else. That was the breaking point. The moment the fog lifted and the fire lit inside me. I realized I had been playing a rigged game all along. No matter how hard I tried, I would never win their approval. And suddenly, I stopped wanting it. You know, betrayal doesn't always come with screaming fights or slammed doors. Sometimes it's whispered into a phone call you were never meant to hear. Sometimes it's the moment you realize the people you've been trying to please have been rooting for your failure all along. And I wonder, have you ever overheard the truth about what someone really thinks of you? Have you ever caught words that weren't meant for your ears? Words that cut deeper than any insult said to your face? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your stories, because moments like that leave scars no one else can see. That night, I sat at my laptop and opened job search sites again, not because I believed I would magically be hired, but because I refused to let her be right about me. I polished my resume until the words looked like armor. I wrote cover letters like they were battle speeches. I filled out application after application, even knowing rejection would probably follow. Margaret thought her prayer was a prophecy, but I decided it would be my turning point. She wanted me broken. Instead, she gave me the will to fight. What I didn't know then was that the fight was already shifting in my favor. That somewhere out there behind a computer screen, I had long forgotten one of my applications was waiting for the right eyes to see it. And when they did, everything would change. Because sometimes the cruelest words don't end your story. They light the match that starts a new one. The call came on a Monday afternoon when I least expected it. I was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by rejection letters stacked so high they needed a rubber band to hold them together. The laundry basket sat by my feet, David's shirts neatly folded, though my hand still trembled from Margaret's cruel words the night before. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, another telemarketer, another scam. But something told me to swipe. "Hello, is this Jennifer?" a warm, professional voice asked. "This is Jessica Martinez from the Grand Plaza Hotel's Human Resources Department." My heart stopped. Grand Plaza Hotel. Months earlier, in the middle of another wave of despair, I had submitted an application for their guest services coordinator role. I had forgotten about it, lumped it into the dozens that disappeared into silence. But Jessica's voice was different. She wasn't dismissing me. She wasn't sighing at my lack of credentials. She sounded excited. "We received your application," she continued, "and your background in restaurant service really stood out to us. We find that candidates with your kind of experience often thrive in hospitality because you understand people." For the first time in months, my work at Romano's wasn't something to be hidden. It was something valued. Jessica went on describing the position in detail. A starting salary of $45,000 a year, full health and dental benefits, retirement planning, paid professional development. And then, as if that wasn't already a miracle, she added, "The role includes housing in our employee residential building, fully furnished utilities included. Just a 5-minute walk from the hotel." I nearly dropped the phone. Free housing, independence, distance. The chance to finally breathe without Margaret's shadow looming over me. I grabbed a pen, scribbling notes with shaking hands, my pulse racing so fast I could barely keep up. "Would you be interested in scheduling a phone interview later this week?" Jessica asked. Yes, I managed my voice steadier than I felt. Absolutely yes. When I hung up, I sat in stunned silence. The rejection folder on the table looked smaller somehow, the laundry basket lighter. The pink envelope Margaret had been preparing in her purse suddenly seemed meaningless compared to the offer I now held in my hand. For months they had made me believe I was worthless. But here was proof, solid, undeniable proof, that my experience mattered, that my skills were real, that someone saw value in me when my own family refused to, and best of all, it was mine. This opportunity didn't come from David or from Margaret or from Emma. It came from me. From the late nights on my feet at Romano's, from the customers I kept smiling even when my heart ached, from the persistence that kept me applying, even when rejection became routine. It was mine. I didn't tell David. I didn't tell anyone. For once I wanted to hold something sacred, something that belonged only to me. While Margaret polished her speech and rehearsed my humiliation, I carried my secret like armor. And the timing. God, the timing was poetic. She had spent weeks preparing to humiliate me at Romano's. She had gathered her allies, rehearsed her cruelty, wrapped it in pink paper and silver butterflies. But what she didn't know was that I had my own envelope tucked into my purse. Inside was a job offer that would dismantle every cruel narrative she had spun about me. In 2 weeks I could be gone. A new city, a furnished apartment, a real career, and people who valued me. While she plotted my downfall, life had quietly handed me my uprising, and I couldn't wait to reveal it. Sometimes the universe writes a plot twist so perfect, even your enemies end up setting the stage for your victory. For the first time in months, I felt power return to my hands. That job offer wasn't just a piece of paper, it was my weapon, my secret. My proof that every cruel thing Margaret had ever whispered about me was a lie. I printed the email and folded the letter carefully, slipping it into my purse like a talisman. Whenever Margaret's voice rose in my head, whenever David's eyes flickered with shame, I touched the folded paper and reminded myself I was no failure. I carried that secret everywhere. To Romano's, during long shifts, to class at community college, even to bed tucked beneath the pillow like a charm. It became my shield against their daily dismissals. The irony was delicious. While they plotted to strip me of dignity, I was preparing to strip them of control. While they polished their ambush, I rehearsed my revelation in the mirror. I have something to share. 3 days ago, I was offered a position at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Each time I spoke the words, my voice grew stronger, steadier. The closer my birthday dinner crept, the more their anticipation showed. Margaret's tone softened her questions about my outfit laced with false warmth. Emma's smirk grew sharper. David, poor David, couldn't contain his excitement, checking his phone like a child, guarding a secret he couldn't wait to unleash. And all the while I stayed silent. They thought I was walking blind into their trap. But the truth, I was walking straight toward it, knowing I had the power to flip their script entirely. That's the beauty of secrets, they turn fear into anticipation. Every time Margaret called to confirm the details, every time David whispered about a birthday I'd never forget, I smiled quietly because they were right. I would never forget it, neither would they. But here's the part that kept me awake at night. I didn't know exactly how the moment would play out. I knew they had an envelope waiting for me. I knew they had rehearsed my humiliation. What I didn't know was how the room would react when I pulled out mine. Would they laugh? Would they deny me? Would David beg me to stay after seeing what I held? That uncertainty was terrifying and thrilling. I kept picturing it. Margaret sliding her decorated envelope across the table, David recording every flicker of my face. And me, calmly signing, handing it back, then standing tall with my letter in hand. The applause I imagined wasn't just fantasy. It was a promise to myself. A vision of the moment when my silence would finally roar. So I stayed quiet. I let them plan. I let them smirk. I let them believe I was naive enough to walk into their performance unarmed. But inside I was counting down the days, the hours, the minutes. Because the truth is, sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't shouting before the storm. It's waiting until every eye is on you. Every voice is ready to laugh, and then dropping the truth like a bomb they never saw coming. And that was exactly what I intended to do. Oh, they thought they were holding the only envelope that mattered. They had no idea mine was heavier. If you're still watching, here's the question. What would you have done with that secret? Would you reveal it quietly to protect yourself, or would you wait for the moment it hurt the most? Think about it and stay with me, because what happened next was beyond anything I imagined. The night finally came. Romano's, the place where I had spent 3 years serving plates and smiles, now transformed into the stage of Margaret's carefully scripted play. I walked in wearing the navy dress I had chosen with care. My hair fell in soft waves after an appointment at Sandra's salon, a small luxury I had allowed myself. I felt eyes on me the moment I entered, not just my family's, but the regular customers who knew me as Jennifer the waitress, not Jennifer the guest. Jennifer, Mr. Romano boomed from behind the counter, his warm smile cutting through the tension I carried. Happy birthday. His voice filled the room, and I could see Margaret stiffen as if his enthusiasm somehow undermined her control. We were led to a corner booth. It felt strange to sit there as a guest instead of hustling with an order pad. Maria, the head cook, peeked through the kitchen window and winked. Tony mouthed happy birthday from across the dining room. My Romano's family was watching, and so was Margaret. She scanned the laminated menu like it offended her fingers, ordering the most expensive dish without hesitation. Emma scrolled through her phone, occasionally glancing up to exchange secret smiles with David. My husband kept tapping on his own phone, his grin giving away how excited he was for what they had planned. I tried to steady myself. Every detail screamed ambush. But I touched the folded job offer in my purse, and calm spread through me. The dinner moved in slow motion. Margaret asked polite questions about my classes at community college, her tone dripping with false interest. Emma smothered a laugh. David smiled too wide, too forced. The tension wrapped around me like a vice. When the cake arrived, the restaurant lit up with song. Regulars joined in, their voices warm and genuine. For a moment, I almost forgot the performance about to unfold. I closed my eyes, blew out the candles, and wished not for acceptance, but for courage. And then it began. Margaret reached into her purse with deliberate grace. Out came the decorated envelope, pale pink with silver butterflies. She held it high, her voice carrying across the room. We have a special gift for you. From all of us. Emma lifted her phone to record. David steadied his camera, angling it toward my face. Their coordination was flawless. They were ready to capture the collapse they expected. I held the envelope. It was heavier than I imagined. The room hushed. Forks paused, mid-air conversations stilled as eyes turned to me. My hands tore the flap open, revealing the legal letterhead, the cold words stamped across the page, petition for dissolution of marriage. Divorce. On my birthday, in front of my coworkers. The air in the booth grew thick, every breath heavy. Margaret's smile gleamed with triumph. Emma leaned forward, waiting for my breakdown. David's phone lens glinted, fixed on my face. But instead of tears, I felt clarity. I picked up the pen they had provided and signed my name with steady strokes, folded the papers, slipped them back into the envelope. Then I looked up, meeting each of their eager faces. "Thank you," I said calmly. "This is the most generous gift you could have given me." The restaurant buzzed with whispers. Mr. Romano frowned from across the room. Maria froze mid-stir behind the kitchen window. Customers craned their necks, sensing drama. But I didn't falter. My secret was still waiting in my purse. "So, tell me, if you were in my seat, surrounded by cameras and cruelty, what would you have done? Would you have cried, shouted, walked away, or waited like I did for the perfect moment?" Leave your answer in the comments, because I know so many of you would have felt the same pressure burning through your chest. The stage was set. Margaret thought her play was complete, but the truth. My performance hadn't even begun. The air around our booth was electric, charged with the weight of expectation. Margaret leaned back, her smile sharp and satisfied, certain she had destroyed me. Emma's phone hovered, her finger ready to capture every second of what she thought would be my collapse. David's camera stayed trained on me, his eyes glittering with the promise of humiliation. But they had no idea, because in my purse sat an envelope of my own, one they could never have anticipated. I stood slowly, the signed divorce papers in my hand. The hush of the restaurant deepened as I tucked them neatly back into Margaret's pink envelope and placed it on the table in front of her. Then, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I reached into my purse and withdrew another envelope. White crisp official. "I have some news of my own to share," I said, my voice clear enough to carry across the room. Emma's phone tilted. David lowered his, slightly confused. Margaret's confident smile wavered. 3 days ago, I continued, I was offered a position at the Grand Plaza Hotel as guest services coordinator, a starting salary of $45,000 a year, full benefits, housing included. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Mr. Romano froze mid-step, his mouth forming a wide grin. Maria peered out from the kitchen window, her eyes shining. Tony dropped his cleaning rag and started clapping before he even realized it. The sound spread. Applause broke out across the room, voices rising in genuine joy. My co-workers, my regular customers, strangers who had watched me serve tables with a tired smile, they were all cheering for me. And my family, they sat frozen. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish, her expression collapsing from triumph into disbelief. Emma's phone slipped in her hand before she scrambled to keep recording, her wide eyes betraying her shock. David's camera drooped into his lap, his face pale, the realization sinking in that their grand performance had backfired spectacularly. I unfolded the job offer letter, the elegant letterhead gleaming under the restaurant lights. They recruited me because of my restaurant experience, I explained, my voice steady. They said the skills I learned here at Romano's are exactly what hospitality management requires. I held the letter high enough for everyone to see. It felt like vindication, solid and undeniable, every cruel word Margaret had spoken about me dissolving into nothing. "You thought tonight would be my ending," I said, locking eyes with Margaret, "but really it's my beginning." The applause grew louder. Customers raised glasses in impromptu toasts. Mr. Romano clapped my shoulder proudly, declaring for everyone to hear, "Jennifer is one of the best employees I've ever had. That hotel is lucky to have her." Margaret's cheeks flushed crimson. Emma's recording meant to capture my humiliation, now documented their own. David's silence was deafening. I let the moment linger. The divorce papers sat forgotten in front of them, their decorated envelope reduced to a prop in a play they no longer controlled. My envelope had rewritten the script, and in that instant, standing tall while strangers applauded and my family crumbled, I realized something profound. Revenge doesn't always require cruelty. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply proving them wrong. They came to Romano's expecting a breakdown. Instead, they witnessed a rebirth. And yet what happened after the applause settled revealed just how deeply their plans had unraveled. The applause echoed long after it faded. I could still hear it ringing in my ears as I sat back down, my job offer letter resting proudly on the table. Around us, the energy in Romano's had shifted. What was supposed to be my public execution had turned into a celebration. Strangers were smiling at me. My co-workers were beaming with pride. The very walls seemed to hum with vindication. And across from me, silence. Margaret's hands clenched around her designer purse, knuckles white. The triumphant sparkle in her eyes had vanished, replaced by something I had never seen before: fear. Emma fiddled with her phone, uncertain if she should keep recording or shut it off to hide their humiliation. David stared at me, like he no longer recognized the woman sitting across from him. "You knew," Margaret finally whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You planned this." I shook my head. "I planned nothing," I said evenly. "I just refused to let you define me." Her lips parted, but no words came. For once, she was speechless. David tried to recover, forcing a shaky laugh. "Jen, maybe we should talk about this privately." "No," I cut him off, my voice sharp enough to slice through his excuses. "You made this public. You wanted an audience. Well, now you have one. And they're watching you choke on your own cruelty." Gasps fluttered through the tables around us. Margaret flinched as if I had slapped her. Emma lowered her phone at last, her smirk gone. I leaned forward, letting my words land like arrows. "You spent years telling me I wasn't enough, that my work was shameful, that David deserved better. Tonight you tried to bury me. But what you don't understand, Margaret, is that you've given me freedom. And with it, I will build a life bigger than your small, bitter world could ever imagine." The applause began again, this time softer but steady. It wasn't the rowdy cheers from earlier. It was the sound of quiet agreement, of people recognizing truth when they heard it. David's hand trembled as he reached for the envelope of divorce papers, as though he could erase what had just happened by hiding them. "Jen, let's be reasonable." Reasonable, that was the word he chose. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a partner, but a man who had chosen silence over loyalty, cowardice over love. And in that moment, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I stood again, my chair scraping the floor. My co-workers, Maria, Tony, even Mr. Romano watched me with tears of pride shining in their eyes. "You wanted me gone," I said, my voice steady. "So congratulations, I'm gone, but not broken, stronger, free." The restaurant erupted once more, the sound so overwhelming that Margaret shrank back into her seat. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of her own defeat. And as I walked toward the door, envelope in hand, I felt the eyes of every customer, every co-worker, every witness burn with respect. The butterflies on Margaret's envelope had been meant to symbolize my downfall. But in the end, it was my wings that spread. What happened after I left Romano's that night would shock even me. The divorce papers weren't just a gift of freedom, they became evidence, a weapon in court, and the final nail in the coffin of their manipulative game. Stay with me, because the way their own plan backfired in the courtroom was even more satisfying than what happened in that restaurant. 2 weeks later, I stood in a courtroom holding the same decorated envelope Margaret had handed me on my birthday. The pink butterflies looked ridiculous under the harsh fluorescent lights, a childish wrapper around something so cruel. But now, it wasn't just a symbol of humiliation, it was evidence. David sat at one table beside his attorney. Margaret and Emma were behind him, their polished masks slipping into anxious silence. I sat at the other table, my attorney steady at my side. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. The judge leafed through the papers, frowning as he examined the signatures. The premeditated timing, the video Emma had so eagerly recorded. Yes, that same video, meant to immortalize my breakdown, was now being played frame by frame as evidence of deliberate emotional cruelty. The judge's eyes narrowed. So he said, looking directly at David, "Your family orchestrated this performance in a public restaurant on her birthday for the purpose of humiliation." David shifted uncomfortably. His attorney stammered. Margaret paled. And I sat straighter, calm, almost serene. The video told the story better than I ever could. Margaret sliding the envelope across the table. Emma grinning behind her phone. David angling his camera for the best shot. My co-workers and regulars frozen in shock as the truth unfolded. And then the twist, the moment I signed the papers, calmly thanked them and revealed my job offer. The courtroom was silent when the video ended. Silent except for the sound of Margaret's breathing, shallow and uneven. The judge's gavel hit the desk once. "This is not a divorce born of incompatibility," he said firmly. "This is cruelty, premeditated, calculated, and carried out in public. Mrs. Walsh, you owe this woman nothing. No alimony, no financial entanglements. The settlement is hers to walk away clean." I exhaled a breath I had been holding for 2 years. The weight slid off my shoulders, replaced by something new, relief, pride, freedom. Margaret's head dropped into her hands. Emma's phone was tucked away at last, as if hiding it could erase what she had captured. And David. He stared at me, realization dawning that the same cruelty he had condoned had cost him everything. I gathered my things with dignity, the divorce decree stamped and final. My job offer letter still crisp and bright, my maiden name restored. Outside the courthouse, the air was cool and fresh. I looked up at the sky and smiled. Margaret's envelope, the one meant to destroy me, had become the very tool that set me free. And you know what? That's the thing about revenge. It doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looks like paperwork and patience. Sometimes it looks like a judge calling out the truth you've known all along. That night I packed my bags for the Grand Plaza Hotel. A furnished apartment, a salary that promised independence, and a team that actually valued my skills waited for me. The life Margaret had sworn I could never have was mine. But let me ask you this. Have you ever seen someone's cruelty backfire so perfectly that it almost felt like justice wrote itself? Subscribe and join this community, because here we celebrate stories where the underestimated rise higher than anyone imagined. And believe me, my rise had only just begun. The first morning at Grand Plaza Hotel, I stepped into the marble lobby wearing my new uniform, the name tag on my chest reading clearly, Jennifer Walsh, Guest Services Coordinator. It felt surreal, like walking into a life I had only dared imagine. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers, carrying the subtle weight of possibility, and I inhaled it deeply, savoring the independence I had fought so hard to earn. My furnished apartment in the employee residential building was a sanctuary. Large windows framed the city skyline, and a balcony offered quiet moments for coffee before the morning rush. Here, no one whispered about my inadequacy. No one judged the hours I had spent serving tables, navigating rejections, and rebuilding myself piece by piece. This was my space, my time, my life. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt fully in control. Jessica Martinez. My supervisor greeted me on the first day with warmth and clarity. She didn't talk down to me. She didn't question my experience. Instead, she said, "Jennifer, your background in restaurant service gives you instincts that other coordinators have to learn through training. You anticipate needs, read people, and handle pressure without losing composure. These are exactly the skills luxury hospitality demands." Her words sank deep into my soul. After months of silence, whispers, and doubt from my family, someone recognized my value for what it truly was. The skills I had honed at Romano's, the empathy I had practiced with every customer, the stamina and attention to detail, I realized all of it wasn't just enough, it was exceptional. Training began with leadership workshops, corporate communication seminars, and management simulations. The programs revealed abilities I hadn't acknowledged in myself, lessons I had instinctively developed during years of customer service and perseverance. The woman Margaret had mocked as a temporary waitress now led team exercises, coached new hires, and contributed ideas that executives noted as innovative. 4 months in, I earned my first promotion, Assistant Guest Services Manager. My salary jumped above $50,000 a year, enough to not just pay bills, but save, invest, and indulge in small luxuries that had been impossible before. I bought quality clothes that reflected my confidence, scheduled regular salon appointments, and even traveled short distances for professional development conferences. Every step was proof that my determination could translate into tangible success. Word of my achievements inevitably made its way back to Margaret. Linda, a country club acquaintance, stayed at the hotel for a business trip and requested my assistance for her corporate event. Recognition from someone in Margaret's social circle was thrilling the validation that my success couldn't be ignored. She had once tried to frame me as incapable. Now the same network she trusted to observe me was praising me. David, too, began to reach out, connecting through LinkedIn, as if my success required his approval. I ignored his messages. I didn't need recognition from someone who had stood silent while his mother orchestrated years of humiliation. My life no longer depended on their validation. I was thriving on merit skill and the relationships I had built honestly. 6 months after starting, I received another promotion, guest services manager, overseeing 12 coordinators across 3 departments with a company car and a substantial increase in salary. Each milestone reminded me that Margaret's predictions had been catastrophically wrong. Every achievement was a victory not just for my career, but for the sense of self they had tried to dismantle. Standing on stage at the hotel's annual recognition ceremony, accepting an award for exceptional customer satisfaction, I glanced at the audience of executives and colleagues. For a moment, I pictured Margaret's face, her disbelief, her silenced smirk. The woman who had spent 2 years trying to convince me I wasn't good enough had inadvertently pushed me to the very heights she believed I could never reach. The applause washed over me like sunlight through a storm. I had achieved what I wanted most, not revenge, but freedom, respect, and undeniable success. My work was recognized, my effort mattered, and I had done it entirely on my own terms. This was the culmination of patience, resilience, and quiet strategy. The lessons were clear. The cruelty of others can only define you if you allow it. But when you take control, pursue growth relentlessly, and value your own worth, you can rise above even the most carefully orchestrated sabotage. The Grand Plaza Hotel had become more than a workplace. It was a sanctuary, a proving ground, and a monument to my independence. Every morning when I slipped on my uniform and clipped my name tag to my chest, I felt a thrill I had never experienced while walking into my family home. Here I was, recognized for my skill, my judgment, and my dedication, not judged for what I didn't have, or for who Margaret wanted me to be. That evening, I decided it was time to finally confront the family one last time. My birthday had passed, and with the divorce finalized, the only thing left was acknowledgement if they were capable of it. Romano's was still my second home, so I chose the familiar corner booth for our meeting. Margaret and Emma arrived looking apprehensive. David followed his expression a mix of confusion and defensiveness. I greeted them calmly, letting them sense immediately that the dynamic had shifted. Gone was the timid woman who had once apologized for every word, every action, every choice. I was composed, confident, and armed with both experience and validation. "You handed me divorce papers 3 days ago," I began, my voice measured and firm. "You thought they would destroy me, break me, but what they did was free me. Free me to take a path that you said I couldn't. Free me to prove that your judgment, your limitations, and your expectations are meaningless in the face of determination and perseverance." Margaret opened her mouth, perhaps to argue, but I raised a hand. "No words are necessary. You've seen it yourself. My position at the Grand Plaza Hotel starts in 2 weeks. Salary $45,000 a year. Housing and benefits included. My promotion to guest services manager came 6 months after starting. I am respected, valued, and no longer bound by the toxic environment you tried to maintain." Emma's phone slipped out of her hand as she processed the information. David's jaw tightened. He realized that his passive complicity had contributed to the creation of a woman who now stood taller than he could imagine. Margaret's poised demeanor faltered, the carefully rehearsed veneer of control cracking. I let the silence linger, letting each fact sink in. Every achievement, every bit of professional recognition was a testament to my perseverance. And I made sure they understood this was not mere luck. This was hard work, intelligence, and resilience that they could never buy or orchestrate. You believed that diminishing me would elevate your family, your status, your son. But the reality is that the only elevation here is mine, I continued. Your attempt at control, at humiliation, has created nothing but evidence of your own insecurities. And now every eye that saw me struggle in Romano's, every customer who witnessed your attempt at my destruction, sees the truth. I am capable. I am successful. I am free. Their faces, pale and shocked, mirrored the quiet triumph that bubbled inside me. I had transformed their intended punishment into public acknowledgement of my independence. And I knew something else. This was my final curtain call. I wasn't staying to negotiate emotions or seek apologies. Their judgment, their criticism, their conditioned control had no bearing on my future. As I gathered my things and rose from the booth, I smiled at Mr. Romano Maria and Tony, who had come to watch this private family drama unfold. Their pride and support were genuine, unconditional, and infinitely more valuable than the approval I had once sought from my family. "You see," I said quietly as I stepped toward the exit, "the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's thriving in a life they never imagined I could have." Outside, the cool evening air felt cleaner than it had in years. Each step toward my car was a step away from 2 decades of control, judgment, and manipulation. The streetlights glinted off the pavement like tiny beacons of possibility, reminding me that the world is wide, and opportunity belongs to those who dare to claim it. I slid into the driver's seat, the city skyline stretching before me, a reflection of all I had achieved and all that awaited. My phone buzzed with messages from David and Margaret, probably scrambling, trying to understand how the game they had so carefully plotted had slipped entirely from their grasp. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. My life no longer required validation from those who had never deserved it. The path ahead was bright. My career, my independence, my self-respect, each one earned, nurtured, and undeniable. And as I drove into the night, I knew with absolute clarity that the greatest gift Margaret had ever given me wasn't divorce papers, it was freedom. Freedom to rise, to succeed, to live my life entirely on my own terms. If you've been inspired by my journey, there are countless other stories where courage, patience, and determination turn adversity into triumph. Don't stop here. Click the next video to see more incredible transformations, and remember, your freedom and worth are yours to claim. The city lights faded behind me as I drove, but the sense of clarity and peace inside never dimmed. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of freedom, the kind that isn't given, isn't borrowed, but earned through struggle, patience, and unwavering belief in oneself. Margaret's attempts to control me, David's silence, Emma's scorn, all of it had been transformed into fuel, propelling me toward a life that reflected my true worth. At Grand Plaza Hotel every day reminded me that my value was not tied to someone else's approval. The applause of coworkers, the respect of my managers, and the gratitude of guests who appreciated my skill and dedication became the soundtrack of a life reclaimed. I had built a life where achievement was measured by effort, impact, and personal growth, not by the arbitrary standards of others. Walking into my furnished apartment each evening, I no longer carried the weight of judgment or expectation. The quiet balcony became a place for reflection, a space where I could savor accomplishments without apology. I realized that true victory isn't revenge, it's independence. It's the ability to flourish while those who sought to diminish you are left to confront their own limitations. I also understood the most important lesson of all: confidence and perseverance are stronger than any manipulation, and self-respect cannot be stolen if you refuse to surrender it. The experience shaped me, teaching me how to stand firmly in my own power, trust my instincts, and never let fear of judgment dictate my life choices. As I looked out over the skyline, I felt gratitude for the hardships, the rejection, and even the cruelty, because they had forced me to grow. And I knew the only approval I will ever need is my own, and the freedom to live authentically is the most valuable gift anyone can receive. This is how I turned betrayal into triumph, humiliation into liberation, and a gift meant to destroy me into the doorway of the life I always deserved.